Welcome to Do Not Go Quiet.
Here's the deal. I'm the best there is, plain and simple. And nobody can hang with my stuff.
With Eric Wilson.
There's a big, hairy American winning machine.
Branlin Shockey, what's up, brother?
Hey, Eric. Love the intro. Very cool.
I like the guitars hanging in the background. I didn't know. Are you a musician of sorts?
Yeah, I don't know if I qualify as a musician, but yeah, I play. Like to. Yeah. Kind of anything creative I like to pursue. And yeah, guitar is definitely a bigger part of my life these days than it probably should be.
I fiddle around with, like, I kind of got buried in it during COVID. And then when COVID came out and I started going down this bow hunting wormhole, the guitar has taken a back seat, unfortunately.
Yeah. Guitar took a backseat for me for the last probably 20 years. And just recently I think I was, I don't know what I was doing, going through a midlife crisis probably. And I was like, I really miss playing guitar like back in university. So I just started playing again.
Which one are you playing? What's your favorite guitar that you've got?
Ooh, good question. So let's see here. So this one. This one right here.
Gotcha.
That is a 1943 Southern Jumbo made by Gibson.
Oh, you're a vintage guy.
Yeah. And funny thing, they're actually, like, that was during the war, right? In the 40s.
Yeah.
And they a lot of the men went off to fight the war, and a lot of the women stayed back. And so they took over the positions in the factory. So for a brief period in the early 40s, man, I just can't get this.
You got it.
The women were actually making the guitars at Gibson. So that's one of them.
Yeah. They made the guitars. They made the shells. They made the tanks, right? They made everything.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's your favorite one? That's the one you like to play the most?
That's the one that has the most meaning for me. If the house is burning down after I rescued the kids and my wife, I'd probably
You're getting the Gibson.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. Yeah. So the way that so obviously a lot of people right now are talking about Once We Were Wolves, the story that you did with Cam Haynes. I had seen a couple other things that you did, but the emotion that you were able to capture in that, I think you told me just kind of in our pre-interview that it's kind of blown up way past what you expected anything to happen, right?
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if it's way past, but it's certainly, at the end of the day, they're hunting grizzly bears, right?
Right.
And that's always kind of an iffy thing, right? There's a few animals that, for whatever reason, people see differently than they see other animals. And so, like, if they were hunting elk or something, no problem. Grizzly bears, or obviously, things like elephants, polar bears, pandas, not really pandas. I'm saying,
you'd probably be getting a different response if we were.
Yeah, a little bit different response. Yeah, I just, I thought there'd be a bit of a backlash potentially, but there really hasn't so far.
Yeah, I think so. I watched your interview with him, and one of the things that he said was, it's pretty amazing that there's, most people get to know you through your dad, Jim Shockey, but he said there's a chance that people could see this film and get to know Jim Shockey through you. If you're like some of my friends or people, who may know me that listen to this may not be big hunters. Jim Shockey is one of the icons of outdoor television and adventure hunting. But me being new to the game, I'm that guy, right? Like, I was introduced to you. I was kind of blown away by the way this was filmed and the backstories and the way that you captured emotion. I didn't know who Jim Shockey was, other than I'd probably seen, Uncharted or some things like that, but I didn't like register in my head. His resonance was, came from you. Is that kind of a weird situation for you?
Yes, that's very atypical. Yeah, but I think it's awesome. I'm going to tell him about that. Yeah, it's funny. From early on, I've been behind the camera, so that's just the way it is. Unfortunately, people in front of the camera, they get the, a lot of the accolades, they get a lot of the credit, and I think in Dad's case, that is absolutely merited. But yeah, I think when Cam said that, I thought that too. It's it is kind of cool to think that people could be introduced to him through me.
So is this, being behind the camera, is that what you always wanted to do, or is it something that kind of naturally occurred because of what your dad did and the position you were put in? Did you want to be a filmmaker from early on? Like, did you have a passion for that, or How, is it just something you kind of fell into?
Yeah, great question. That's a tough one because so the honest answer to that is Dad is he's really good at what he does, or now he's kind of retired what he did. Uh, it was always difficult for me to think that I could just walk in front of a camera and be just as good as he was, and it was tough for me to accept the idea that in order to, try and go in his footsteps, try and do what he was doing, I would have to like go through this process where like I know that I'm not good on camera and I'm just being on camera right now because of who my dad is. Uh,
Was that something that you put on yourself though? I mean, right
oh, no,
now,
sure.
in watching you on Cam's podcast and talking to you ahead of time, I think you're good on camera. So was that something that where you were like comparing yourself constantly to your dad, and that's why you came up with that thought process?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. Yeah.
That's tough. I mean, to put that on yourself as a young kid.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I've never really thought about that, but yeah, you're right. It's yeah, it's certainly all internal for me. But I did find that with the being behind the camera on the production end, I did feel like I found my quote unquote purpose, and I found out where with what Dad was doing, because he's like, again, for people who don't know, I mean, he was going through the stratosphere in the hunting world, right, or outdoor space,
Right.
uh, and so to go along with that and to, I think, add value to that and help with that, I found that I was able to do that, but it did require me to be behind the camera and to focus my efforts on making a great, entertainment experience for for viewers.
So at what age were you when you actually started not just interning or, apprenticing, but what age were you when you really started to become a significant or an integral part of, those productions?
I was probably, let me think here. It would have been after university. So I remember way back, when I was like 12 years old. So Dad had this has a series called The Hunting Adventures, and he started that when I was quite young. And I remember, I don't know what I was doing. I was like, this is probably totally illegal, but I'll tell you anyway. He had a little.
If you're with family, I don't think it's ever illegal, is it?
Well, no, I mean, he had a target, and he put like a cardboard box, he filled it full of paper, and it had like a really slow shooting BB gun or something. And
Okay.
when he would work, I would practice shooting this little BB gun into this little target in his office. And it was sometime around then, or maybe a little bit later, where he was talking about starting hunting adventures. So I was privy to the very early discussions on, how do you go about making a TV show? Because Dad didn't know how to do it from nothing. Um, and that helped me later on. I think that would have been maybe 10 years later when I started professionals. I was right out of university, but at no point did I think that making a TV show from scratch was impossible, or that I needed to have some crazy fancy equipment or gear or something to make that happen. That just didn't occur to me because I saw it already done as I was growing up.
Yeah. So you saw pieces of the process along the way, and maybe you didn't know how to do the entire thing from Jump Street,
Right.
but you'd seen it all, and okay, all I've got to do is just kind of dig in and figure this out. So
Yeah.
I know that you've worked on a lot of productions with him, from Uncharted, Yukon, and all those. Was there ever a time where you broke off from that? And I know, I think I heard you reference something about LA, that you broke off from that and tried to either go look at something else, learn something else in the film space, to see if there was, room outside of outdoor television for you.
Yeah, so the LA thing was a little different. I lived in Orange County for I don't know, 4 months or something. But that was earlier. That was in first year university. So I was going to go to school for business because I didn't know that I wanted to get into film. In fact, if you would have asked me then, I would have said I didn't, because again, father-son relationships are interesting, and Dad was kicking tail in the production space and the outdoor space. At that point in my life, I wanted to go try something else.
What did you think you wanted to do?
I thought I wanted to go into finance or marketing, actually.
Okay.
So I went to like a fancy business school and took all the courses, and was very seriously looking at doing that.
So what pulls you back in? You go to university,
Yeah.
you're looking at business or marketing. What pulls you back into filmmaking?
So I'd love to say that I had this epiphany and I was like, oh, like, film is for me. And I went to university and figured out like everything I didn't want to do. What really happened though is I was a nerdy kid. Um, in high school, I was, reading all the time. I was probably in the chess club. Love math. I was good at calculus, like stuff like that. Um, and I went to university, and my eyes got opened a little bit. And I started doing things like playing guitar. My grades dropped horrendously, and I was having fun. Making new friends, experiencing new things, and after university, it just kind of abruptly ended. I didn't have a plan, and but I knew I wanted to get into business. So that's what I thought. So I talked to this guy who was had a startup, and he was actually taking. What was he doing? He was sending private jets for people, for like executives, and he needed somebody like some peon basically to hang out with these people on the jets and keep them whatever, I don't know, fresh waters and answer any questions they had when they're flying. And I said, great, I'll do it, because I thought it was a cool startup idea and I'm all excited. And he said, sweet, when you can start? And I said, tomorrow. And I said, how much are you paying me? And he said, nothing. And I said,
The joy of working with me and the experience of working with me.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I've had a few of those.
The experience. And so at that point I was like, oh, okay, like this, this is real life stuff. And people don't just like, you're not just going to be some successful entrepreneur overnight. Just because you think you want to be in university. And university is a bubble, right? It's not reflective of what actual business and actual life is like.
Right.
And so I realized that, and that made me circle back to Dad and what he was doing. And it just happened to be at about that time, he called me. I've told the story before, but he called me on a flight back from Pakistan, which for most people, their dad calling them on a flight back from Pakistan is probably pretty weird. For me, that's just, another day. And what he was doing back then, he was traveling probably 300 days a year at that point. So he called me and he said, hey, I have this idea. I want to make a TV series. It's like, it's a hunting series, but it's different. It's not just about killing the animal, right? It's about more than that. And he wanted to call the professionals, and he kind of told me give me a one pager essentially on what he thought it could be. It's one of those things where he was flying back on a midnight flight or whatever it was. And he had an idea and he wrote it down. I thought it was great. And I still wasn't sure I wanted to do it, but I thought about it for about a week. And then he said, essentially like, are you in or out? And I said, I'm in.
So he had all the backing, the financial backing on it, and he had already started having conversations with networks, those kinds of things. He needed you to do the production side,
no,
the film side, or
no. My recollection, I could be wrong here, but my recollection is he just had the idea.
So you did the whole thing. You went out and did you pull all that together?
I did not pull the sponsor. So what I did is, so at that point, that's just an idea.
Right.
And he said, okay, see what you can do. Take this footage we shot in Pakistan and see what you can put together. But it's got to be different than what the traditional hunting show would be.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really know how to edit at the time. I didn't know much about anything really. So I took a few months. YouTube was relatively early at this point. So I went on YouTube and I started figuring out how to edit, how to sound design. And then I started looking for, actually I didn't start looking for, I just tried to do what I thought would be cool with the footage that we had. And I was a tech person, right? So, and frankly speaking, at that point in the outdoor industry, a lot of people weren't. A lot of people were sticking to the standard, tried and true sort of like method that they've been doing for years, back in the older days of broadcasting, which kind of looked like this. And it was, hey, welcome to the show. My name's John. Today we're going hunting white-tailed deer. I'm so happy you can join me. We're going to talk about our sponsors before we go out, blah, 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 blah. And then they show a deer getting hunted and killed, and then show another one, probably two, and then they'd end the show. Lots of commercials, not a lot of story, just a lot of like hunting content. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I wasn't coming from a space where I was, enthralled with hunting necessarily. I like stories. I liked, movies by Guy Ritchie and things that don't have any, or never did have any, wouldn't belong in the outdoor space. And people look at me who are already doing those shows and be like, what are you doing? That doesn't, why would you think you can make a hunting show? Like, why would you know anything about it? You're a kid from university. that likes movies and TV shows that have nothing to do with hunting. So I just did what I wanted to do. And that was the pilot for the professionals. It was in Pakistan. It was not, honestly, it's not my best work, but it had some cool tech stuff. Like back then there was a program called Optical Flow, which we can have now, but it just came out back then. And so I took this ibex that was jumping over a cliff, which is like 3 frames. Like it's not even a good shot. But I slowed it down to like 1,000 or something, using Optical Flow. And I probably spent 3 days in this stupid shot. And people were like, wow, they couldn't believe that this was, people were really blown away by it. And then we took that pilot to the channel, and that allowed us to get the sponsors because people thought, oh, wow, this is like a new version of what a hunting show can be.
Yeah. I mean, I think that what you're referencing, I'm very new to the hunting space, but
Yeah.
my brother hunted his entire life. So I saw a lot of that stuff. He would get the videos and all that. It seemed very transactional. Like you said, you'd have the sponsors and this and that. And it'd be like, dude, kill the animal, more sponsorship, kill the animal. And it sounds like what you're saying is you really started looking at it like a film and started thinking about storylines, cinematography, how can I translate the journey and the process a lot more than just the outcome.
Right. And let me clarify that was not because I thought that I was some genius or anything. It was just
what you liked.
It's just what I liked. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they say genius lots of times, comes from a person's most inner, I think, desire or some kind. There's something along line, but basically, I think the people that are most tied into doing things really well, it's because they're doing things the way they like to do them and the way they enjoy them, and then that ultimately comes out in the product they produce, as opposed to trying to produce a product that is resonating somewhere else. They're doing something that resonates with them, and in translation, it resonates with other people.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. Yeah.
So as you were doing that, and as you were kind of taking the task that your dad gave you, how did that relate in terms of you looking at a story and deciding, telling that story differently, not just with technology, but, at what point did you start to think about, how do I potentially set up this shot, or how do I potentially film what's going on right now in a way that's going to tell the story that I want to tell? Like, when did it come from? You had footage and you edited it to you're filming footage and you're trying to capture something that you see happening.
Yeah. So, as I think he should have done, Dad in those days, it wasn't like, he was saying, hey, like, come on board, I'll share all the profits with you, make lots of money, and you'll be like super successful when you're 20. He said, I'm going to pay you 40 grand Canadian a year to do this, produce a show. And, 40 grand Canadian a year is like 30,000 American, something like that. Which I was grateful for, but it's not like it was I wasn't driving a Bentley or anything. And he expected,
have you got kids?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got older kids and I'm the same way. They're all like, Dad, like, look at how much money you make. And I'm like, yeah, look how much money I make. Right. There's nothing written down on a piece of paper that says I'm supposed to give it to you.
Right. And having kids now, I'm going to do the same exact thing if I get that opportunity, because it I don't know. I think it's easy to, give too much too quickly or spoil people. So
I think it builds a fortitude.
Yeah, sure.
It teaches. Yeah. I know a lot of people whose kids were given everything. Mm-hmm. And then I know people who, even though they had it to give, they made their kids work for it. And those kids turned out a lot better than the other ones in most cases.
Well, you know what? It sets you up for failure, basically, because you get so much
Agreed.
success. It's not really necessarily based on your output or your actual ability. And then following that, because you're always going to do something following that, you're now tasked with an impossible metric to because people always want to get better and better and better and better. And you've already got everything. It's like hard to internally make that work, I think.
Yeah.
There. Anyway, dad certainly didn't have that problem, and I didn't either. So he expected me to wear different hats, and
Mm-hmm.
I did. And part of that was filming, which I sucked at in the beginning. So again, I didn't just, like, other than the editing side, I did fine, but I didn't just walk in here with the camera and like start killing it. I had plenty of time to make horrible filming decisions, and I got bad footage. And I'd done some filming with Dad for his hunting adventure show, so I had experience with cameras a little bit. But I never cared. Like, I never never looked at them as anything other than just like a way to, spend my summer when I was in high school. That changed when I went to Nepal. So Nepal was in, I don't know, 2012, I think.
So was this show that the conceptual show that you start, did this become Uncharted, or what show did this become?
Right. Then, so after the first 2 seasons of the Professionals, the Professionals was doing great. But Dad and I had talked, and I, at that point, I was never satisfied with that. Probably maybe to a detriment, I don't know, but I never really was like, wow, I'm just gonna rest on my laurels and here we go, and Professionals is gonna go on forever. So I think we were talking. It might have been me that initiated this one. What if we could do an hour show instead of a half hour? Because that, honestly speaking, what that does is it doubles your prospective sponsorships coming in. Because we were maxed with what Dad could travel. Dad can do 300 days a year. He's got to do two series, and Hunting Adventures is like 26 episodes of half hours. So I thought, if we really lean into story, would it be possible to not increase the time we're using you, Dad? And say if we go on some 10-day trip, instead of doing 1 half-hour episode, what if we could do like 2-hour episodes out of that? Because I'm thinking now, hey, we can make an entertaining story without animals dying all the time, because that's the problem with hunting shows, is that people expect to see animals being killed, or they used to back then.
Yeah. Well, not only that, I mean, from the perspective, like you said, of a storyteller, 30 minutes is not a ton of time, especially if you're dealing with commercials and sponsorships, to have a start and a finish and actually tell a story of any kind of significant substance. So I'm sure being able to take it to an hour, and then potentially even taking, that one hunt that was 30 minutes to maybe 2 different shows, give you a ton more latitude in terms of your ability to develop storylines, shoot things the way you wanted to.
Yeah, that's right. So Nepal was the proving ground for that. And I was going through an interesting time. Like, I was reading, I think, Ayn Rand stuff. I was having some success with the Professionals. And I was, again, right or wrong, very naively, I was thinking I could kind of do anything. So
that's what makes people successful, right?
Yeah.
When you don't know your limitations, you tend to stretch them a lot further.
Yeah. And I would say it was more for me, it was like I didn't know my limitations, rather than like I believed I could literally do anything. It was more just like I didn't.
Right.
I was like, oh, okay, this is the formula. And if I work hard enough at it, it's going to be successful. And so I wasn't worried about it. But yeah, we went to Nepal, and I had to get my act together. And this was just about the time, if any film nerds out there, the DSLR revolution was taking place. So there was a camera called the Sony FS100, and it was a relatively cheap camera, but it was had some cool tech features and slow-mo and stuff. And I took that to Nepal. And you remember it's very commonplace now, but the night sky stuff, the Milky Way going by and all that was all new.
Yeah. It still looks cool, but yeah, I remember seeing some of that stuff when it first started to pop up, and it was like, oh my gosh, what are they doing?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wow. Yeah. So nowadays we see it all the time, but back then people were blown away. So I remember on that trip, I was just so inspired. Like it's almost like if I could bottle up what that feeling is and just always live like that to me is the dream. Like I would literally wake up, everybody else would be sleeping. And we'd be long days hiking over the place in the mountains, and I'd just be loving like every second of it. And I would wake up after doing all that in the middle of the night, like 2:30 a.m. And I'd get my little DSLR out, and it was like super dark and it was freezing, and everybody else would be asleep. And I probably have photos of this somewhere, and I'd be taking these like night time lapses of the stars at like 16,000 feet. And I literally remember like looking up and just being like, this is incredible. This is what I want to do forever. And this is going to be so great. And so
there's those moments in time in everybody's life where, like you said, there's lots of times where you have great things happen and then you look back on them with memories, but there's not a lot of times where you recognize that you're in the middle of a moment when you're in it, and you can sit there and appreciate it for what it is. And it sounds to me like that had a pretty big impact maybe on moving you forward in terms of what you're trying to translate on film.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. Yeah, definitely. I honestly, I don't know that everybody does have that, unfortunately. I think I was lucky to be able to get into that position, obviously with who my dad is, and do something that I did feel like was special. I don't know that if I would have taken a different career path and went into finance, for instance, nothing wrong with
Right.
finance. I probably have more money now, but I don't know that I ever would have been sitting there looking at the spreadsheets or, worrying about the orange juice commodities, whatever we're going to do over the Christmas break or something. I don't know that I ever would have had that thought. And so I don't even know if I would have known that I would have missed it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, I know, I've been in business for 25 years now, but before that, I coached college football for, 10 years. And like, I remember having a moment like that when I was coaching at the University of Tennessee, or excuse me, I was coaching at South Carolina. We were playing the University of Tennessee. Peyton Manning was the quarterback. They're one of the top teams in the country. We're in Knoxville. They had just expanded the stadium, so there's 110,000 people. Like, the place was literally shaken off,
Wow.
the rafters, and we're playing. It's a pretty tight football game, and I'm up in the booth. Like, part of my job was to be in the box and look down and call coverages and those kinds of things. And there was a timeout, and the place was just going insane. And I had a moment like that. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm here right now. Like,
Right.
this is what I dreamed of doing my entire life, and I'm right in the middle of it. It's a pretty insane situation.
There you go. And I'm very thankful that it sounds like you had that same experience that I did. Boy, I don't know that I'd be the same without that. I honestly don't.
So when did you start, independently? And I know your dad's kind of tapered off. I don't know exactly what year it is, but it looks like it was maybe 2019, 2020. When did you start doing some independent projects away from the things that your dad was doing?
After Uncharted would have been, I'm just maybe 2016, somewhere in there, or maybe 2015. I actually tried to get a show started with Cam Haynes at that time because he was coming up. And so I traveled down there with him. We shot a really cool promo you can find on YouTube. And I thought it was great. And this is the first hint of, like I said, me not knowing my limitations, because the channel looked at that and I thought, hey, no problem. This is the formula. I'm just going to keep rolling with this. More shows, no problem. Hire guys. I had
same channel. Who were you? Was it Discovery or who were you pitching it to?
No, this is the Outdoor Channel.
Outdoor Channel. So same channel that was carrying your dad's show. Okay.
Yeah, and to give you some context, I was living by myself in Vancouver at this point. I had an apartment, and obviously I wasn't doing all the editing at this point. It was just way too much. I was doing editing, but not nearly all of it. And so I had totally illegally turned my apartment into an office. So I went down to like secondhand shop or whatever and bought a whole ton of secondhand desks and just lined the outside of my apartment. And so every day at like 8 o'clock, whatever, 7-8 guys would roll into my apartment. And you can imagine, like, editors. So it's like Star Wars t-shirts and stuff. There's an interesting smell in the apartment, and we had to, we're doing color work and stuff too. So we'd have to, black out all the blinds. So it's like a super dark apartment, and we're just working all day in there. Anyway, I figured, hey, this is awesome. I'm living the life. I'm going to launch another series now. And the Cam Haynes promo, even though I thought it was great, the channel just didn't like it. Or they liked the promo, but
what didn't they like about it? When they gave you feedback on it, what did they say?
There's probably, honestly, my read is there was some political stuff with Cam at the time in the channel. And I think that's probably why they didn't go for it, if I'm being honest. So, but maybe it was also just, they looked at me and they thought, you're just a young kid who's been lucky to have success this far. And we don't think you know what you're doing, and make another show. So, and I probably didn't. So I did that. I tried that. And then I did do one called Carter's War. And that was with Ivan Carter. Ivan's.
Yeah, I saw that on your IMDb profile. I was going to ask you about that.
So it's not hunting related at all.
Right.
This is Ivan's sort of like a well-known figure in Africa. And actually, believe it or not, I think he's got his own show coming out on History now coming up, I'm pretty sure. But at that time, we followed him around Africa as he was chasing down, poachers essentially. So, like in Kruger National Park, where all the rhinos are getting killed and the elephants and the ivory and all that, we investigated all that. Some relatively, I would say, dangerous stuff we did. the crocs, like the Mozambique and the rivers where crocs kill like 1,000 people a year, like right, so it's kind of like it was like I was trying to do a Discovery Channel show. It wasn't really my style looking back now. So I think maybe if there is a style that I have, like being true to myself, it's that kind of like cinematic, more like drawn out story, meaningful stuff.
Was that more of like a documentary? I mean, I know it wasn't a documentary, but did it feel more like that kind of a show versus you having the ability to, have more latitude with the storyline?
Yeah, well, the way the deal with the channel was structured is I didn't have full creative control really. I had to, I was working very closely with um, other people to do that series. And it just, I don't know if that's good or bad. I think I definitely had to just politically kind of had to like walk away from what I thought would be right, and so a bit of a different style. So did that. I also did a series on my sister, was like a reality series, again, getting away from my style a little bit. I don't think the series was bad, but it's definitely a different style.
What channel was that for? Was that again Outdoor Channel again?
So all my successes have been for the Outdoor Channel. Now I did try and get the series with Ivan onto Netflix, and my experience with that was interesting. Again, me not knowing my limitations, right? And I thought, I'm just going to sit down in front of these people and they're going to take a look at me and they're going to say, wow, great work. We see what you see. And you're just like that Ayn Rand character, Howard Rourke. And wow, you're going to change the world. And like, come on board, we'll give you $1 million. And I couldn't even sit down at the table. They were so busy with people trying to get their attention at that time. I had to catch one of their like minions on the way to the bathroom basically and like interrupt and say, hey, can I get any time with you at all to even get, and even then it was like, it was a nothing. So.
Which is insane because I look at some of the Drek on Netflix and go, how did that ever get on that channel? So so much of life is about who you know and who you're tied into.
Yeah. And I was frankly shitty at that at the time.
Yeah. Well, you're forced to get better at that, if you're in any form of business, because obviously you've already figured this out, but there's, there's the execution side of your business, but then there's also the, how do I drive business and generate business for my company? And those are two distinctly different, things. The first one I'm really good at, that's kind of part of how I've built, my different companies and those kinds of things. And I've gotten better at the second part, where it sounds like you were better at the second part and you've gotten better at the first part.
Yeah. Yeah. But I agree with you. It's a lot of, a lot of life is just who you know. And that's obviously like you have to have both parts, right? You can't just have a network of people and expect to be successful. But certainly, if you can execute, the people, your friends, the people that support you, and I've been lucky enough to have people that have believed in me, despite me not having the greatest people skills from day one from the Outdoor Channel. So that's why I always go back there. And this series we're doing now called American Made, that's all because Tim Kremen, the president, believes in my ability to do great work. So despite having some failures in my past, I was giving another opportunity. I think we're hopefully back to, making what I think are successful shows.
What's the premise behind that series?
Have you seen Chef's Table?
Yeah.
Okay. So Chef's Table is they're human stories, but it's through the lens of a chef, right? And through food and through the restaurant they created. Imagine that, except through the lens of American entrepreneurs or craftsmen, people with American visionaries. So,
is it like all based around craftsmen, people who create things with their hands? Is that the play on the American Made, or is it any kind of entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's both. As long as everything's made in America. So we generally, and what I found so far is that. And I'm not including like the big corporations here, but generally there's a visionary, and then there are people with that person that are doing the hands-on stuff, and I think it's hard to have one without the other, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. So you've got that project, and then the thing that we kind of touched on in the beginning, that's where I knew your name, but through just some of the other people I knew through film, but you know, where I really first saw the work outside of Uncharted was when you did Once We Were Wolves, that just came out on YouTube, you know, a month, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, something like that. I heard you reference that, you know, that was something that you kind of connected with Kip on before it ever got over to Cam. So what was your connection to Kip early on?
Yeah. So remember when I was saying visionary, Kip is a visionary. So
Right.
and just for a bit of his background, Kip was one of the essentially co-founders of Under Armour, you know, back when they were doing like 18,000 a year in the, you know, in a basement. So he's literally been on that ride where, you know, someone with a vision, and this is him and his partner, but, you know, probably most of his partner at that point, they, you know, turned that into a $4 billion a year business. So when Kip talks, he's really interesting. His ability to articulate the future is like kind of nothing I've ever seen, really. And like like really big picture stuff.
For example, like,
well, for example, so
like
right
what
now,
would he say, or how what would he do like that?
well, so right now I'm wearing his t-shirt, which is Big Truck,
The Big Truck
brewery,
Mhm.
right? So that's just a brewery in Maryland, where Kip's from. And
Shout out to Big Truck.
yeah, shout out to Big Truck.
You're welcome. You're welcome to sponsor the show if you want at any point.
Oh, there you
Just
go.
let me know.
Yeah. Kip would be a great guest. So when he explained Big Truck to me, I didn't fully like, I kind of thought, okay, you want to start a brewery. You've obviously got some money from Under Armour. You can figure it out. But he didn't just like buy into something and then, you know, look at it from like a purely business perspective. He had this idea for like years. And he said that when he, you know, basically planted the first hops, you know, they were going to use, he knew this was going to be like a 7-8 year project before they're even going to be profitable. So that kind of vision, like he's not thinking about getting a return next week or thinking about what's going to happen next week. He's thinking about, oh, hey, Big Truck's going to be a $100 million business. And this is how we're going to get there. And yeah, it's going to take 9 years and it's going to suck and it's going to be hard. But I know that if we follow these steps, we will get there eventually. That's kind of how he operates.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. And so you got connected. How did you get connected to him?
Because, yeah, and see, this is why I have some open doors that a lot of people don't. Is Under Armour sponsored the professionals and the Uncharted for sure.
Okay.
And so I had already met, and Kip's brother Kobe, he was working at Under Armour at that time. So Kobe, Kip's brother, was like our, you know, guy. Like if they had issues with the show or we were going to meet them at one of the trade shows or something, we'd always be sitting across the table from Kobe. So that's the connection. And so Kip knew of my work because, you know, obviously they've been sponsoring a show. Kip was into hunting. He's kind of friends with Cam. And what happened was Kip was going back up to Alaska with Cam. And Kip had, again, going back to the beginning where this is, you know, when I got into this professionals, that was my dad's original vision. This was Kip's vision. I don't know if he was thinking about like Once We Were Wolves, but he was thinking, hey, this would be cool. Cam's going back up to Alaska after Roy died. Do you want to come? And so he just called me out of the blue. I didn't know Kip. I've never met him in my life. I knew who he was. And he said, you know, you want to come up to Alaska? And I said, yeah.
Let's roll.
Let's roll.
That's the kind of, did you recognize at the time what it was going to do, or was it just kind of another opportunity to shoot something that might be cool?
I thought two things, if I'm being honest. The first one is that from what I knew of Kip, I've heard, like, my dad has a lot of respect for Kip. And I trust my dad's opinion. So I actually, to be honest, I like the idea of just going up and spending, you know, 10 days in camp with a guy who co-founded Under Armour. And
so I would just say, I can't, if you're, you know, whether you're young or whatever, as an entrepreneur, like that's such a huge piece of learning how to become a better person at business, at whatever you're doing, is putting yourself in a position where you are around other people who have done it, who have the vision to do it, who have, you know, banged their head against the wall, learned the hard way. Like that may sound like the way you kind of said it was like, oh, I could just kind of thought I might want to, you know, it'd be good to hang out with him. But honestly, from a conceptual standpoint, that's what really successful people do, is they surround themselves with other successful people and they soak them up like a sponge. You know, they're humble enough to recognize I can learn a lot from this person. So, I mean, that makes a lot of sense that you would do that.
Right. Yeah. So, you said sponge, and that's exactly what I did. So aside from the film, and Kip can confirm this, I talked his ear off the whole time. I'm sure he got annoyed as hell because I was just asking him everything about his story. I was asking him how he looks at the world, and then I started asking him about, what other projects he wants to do, not film projects, just business projects, and so we started talking about all kinds of ideas he has. I mean, he's just like an idea machine. He looks at stuff. He's like, oh, this could be different. This could be better. This could be better. And they don't all happen. But I mean, even this morning, I woke up this morning, I had some idea, and I just texted it to him and said, hey, what do you think about this? And he hasn't got back to me, but yeah, we got, so on that film, we got stuck in a blizzard for the first 3 days. And and just kind of like what you said, if you want to pick someone's brain, there is no better place on the planet to do that than being stuck in a blizzard in a tent where you can't go outside. There's no cell reception, and you've run out of just kind of fluffy topics to talk about after the first 6 hours.
And you were going to be there. How many days were y'all there? Was that a 10-day trip?
I think approximately 10 days. Yeah.
So as you were sitting in the blizzard, were you in your head going, are we ever going to get out of here? And am I ever going to capture anything worth capturing?
No. Well, okay. So that's it. So that was aside from the film. The filming side was different. I tried, again, I'm hanging out with Cam Haynes and Kip Fulks. These are no nonsense guys that treat hunting, well, especially Cam here, but this is their livelihood. It's their life. So I try and honor that if I'm in those environments, and I try not to, Cam aside, let anybody else outwork me in those positions. So I was filming the whole time, and I didn't know what was going to happen, but I thought it might be great. We might get something awesome here, and who knows what I can do with this. So I was filming constantly, even when we're trapped in the blizzard. And I think that is a mistake, that some people can fall into, is our trap, is they think, because we're not out hunting, we're not out doing things, that's not an opportunity to film or to capture. There's no story there, and that's not, I don't think, correct.
Was he crawling off the walls? He
Kip?
seems, yeah, no, Cam. Was he which one of them was crawling out of their skin, and which one of them handled it better?
Well, I was in the middle, and Kip was caught to my left. He was probably crawling the tent because I was asking him so many questions, constantly.
He's like, let me out of here and go get hunting.
Yeah, I was just like, shut up. But no, Cam's a really interesting guy. He really does live for that kind of stuff, that adventure stuff. So I don't think there's any point where Cam or Kip were, concerned about, how long the blizzard's going to last. We joke about it, but those guys are pretty comfortable out there.
Yeah. So my, obviously, I think I told you, I can't remember if we were talking already on the recording or not, but I've been in football my entire life, playing football, college football, coach football, up until literally this last year, when next year I'm not coaching football for the first time, and can't remember how long.
Wow.
But I kind of decided I'm 55 years old, and I kind of, for the last couple of years have been like, okay, what am I going to do when I stop coaching football? Right. Cause something that's mentally challenged me, something that's created a lot of camaraderie. There's a tribe in that, very similar to what you get in hunting. There's a lot of like-minded guys who, are connected in the same way. And somehow I got in this bow hunting wormhole. I think it was really just, I listened to Rogan's podcast, and like a lot of people, and I think I saw the Cam Haynes thing, and I started looking at it, and then I started, there's a couple of guys in town who are, big bow hunters, Bert Soren of Soren X, and then Joe Miles, who owns Osseo Gear. And I was lucky enough to kind of get connected to them. So the last 6 months I've been in this bow hunting wormhole. So, I watched some stuff on YouTube, but I got this notification, I think it was 3 or 4 days before the film was going to come out. And it was like, hey, this is, going to be live on whatever Tuesday or Wednesday night. And how did you plan the promo on that? Because it seemed like you had a lot of viewers live. Did I miss that? Or did you have a lot more people watching live than you thought you were going to?
Oh yeah, way more. Yeah. No, there's 5,000 people watching live. Yeah. Something stupid.
And what would you have expected?
Oh, Yeah. Honestly, I didn't really think about it, but a few hundred maybe. So that promo, that wasn't my idea. That was when we do the like that was released on Cam Hanes' YouTube platform, right?
Yeah.
But I've had the film for quite a while, like for months and months, and I've always thought that, and I've actually talked.
You've had it done for like over a year, right?
Yeah.
Didn't I hear you say that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And but I've always thought that I've always wanted to do a quote unquote film, where you spend more, because we're always under deadlines, right? And so there's never been a TV show that I've done where I didn't think in the back of my head, like, we can do better on this. We can flesh out that story more. And once we were Wolves, I was able to really spend some time on that, mostly because I was kind of unemployed during the pandemic and, I was in Fulks. So it kind of made sense. But no, I was not expecting that many people to be watching. I didn't really consider the film. Like, I thought it was good, but I didn't realize that it would resonate so much with people.
Yeah, I think so. I when I saw it, obviously there's this countdown clock, and there's all this stuff going on in my house, and I think my wife wanted to watch something on Netflix, and I actually prepped her the day before, and I said, look, there's this thing coming on tomorrow night. It's at 8:00.
Right.
It's like it's about a hunt in Alaska. I said, I know you're not going to be interested, but I really want to watch this, and I don't want to watch it on my phone while something else is going on. So I'm just like looping you in that's going to be on the TV in the family room. And I was sitting there, and the countdown clock was going. I didn't think it started until like 3 or 4 after. But the way that the film started, and I've watched it multiple times, but I was just, one of the things that captured me, and this image that resonates with me over and over, was you had this shot of Kip drinking out of a stream and talking about, what, even though he had done all this stuff with our Under Armour and all these things, where he really wanted to be, was in the mountains. And the way that got shot, the backdrop on it, like that part right there, like locked me in for the entire thing. And I know there was, most people were there to see Cam and all that kind of stuff, but it was interesting how you weaved Kip's story into that. Was that something that you had anticipated ahead of time, or is that something that kind of, as you saw and were editing, you're like, this is, this belongs in here?
Yeah. So here's what I do for that. I mean, I like to say there's some kind of like magic formula I use, but what I really do is I'll take all the footage from the trip. And remember, I'm filming a lot. I think Kip and Cam would tell you, I don't know how many hours, but I mean, I'm not every morning when Kip would open his eyes or Cam would open their eyes, I'd be, camera right in their face. Cause I don't know I don't know at that time what's good or what's bad. I'm not writing this stuff down, right? There's no script. So I'll take all that footage and then I'll bring it back. And in this case, I sat down with it for a while and I just watch through it all, and I try and figure out, okay, like, what do I have here? And when you start doing that, you spend enough time on it, you go a little bit nuts because you're just staring at a computer screen all day long. But you start to figure out, okay, like what is the theme and what resonates with me. And if you watch that film, you might notice in the first 3 minutes or so, it feels different than the rest, right? I'm showing like random stuff, like I'm showing subways, stuff I shot in Vancouver. I'm showing time lapses, like people working in the city, and traffic, and old archival footage of a bear that's been leashed up. That's like, if I had to say, like, what's the essence of like what I really feel about something like that, that's it. But
and what were you trying to achieve with those things early on? Was there a message you were trying to send, or were you trying to set up the storyline in a certain way?
Okay. Yeah. So I'm trying to set up a storyline in a certain way and also send a message, because I actually do believe this. That shot of, and again, I didn't know this before I started looking through this stuff, and it kind of came to me, but that shot of Kip drinking, right, in the middle of nowhere, I agree, that's a great shot, right? But without context, it's just a great shot, and just great shots are nothing special. There's all kinds of great shots. What he said was something like, outdoors is my church. Okay. Like, this is all I care about. I just want to be a mountain man. And that is interesting because you're looking at, Kip is literally one of the most successful business guys that exists in the USA, right? I mean, he's co-founder of Under Armour. I mean, he found the ultimate pinnacle success and he's happy and living on a yacht somewhere. And that's not the case. Right. So I got thinking about that. And again, I'm kind of like, I'm paraphrasing a little bit on what I was actually feel, because most of it's just kind of by feel. But I started thinking about the big cities that we're trapped in. And I've had these thoughts before. And I looked at my own experience, which was that LA gig I did where I was in a cubicle for months at a time. And I tried to use that experience. I talked to people and figure out, like, are they happy in this environment? Because I sure as heck couldn't see myself doing that forever. And I tried to visually and audibly convey that kind of message. Like, I'm not sure that we as humans are meant to be doing to be lining up at the grocery store to buy our pork that's wrapped in cellophane 8 times and put it in separate bags, next to our bananas that are imported from Ecuador or whatever. We live in a funny, weird state right now. And it wasn't always like that. And B, it might not be what's best for us. There might be something more. And Kip has had this journey. That's his story. Hey, I climbed to the mountain. I saw over the other side, and there's nothing for us there. Everybody's climbing up, trying to, get the paycheck and for good reason. I'm not like, I'm not poo-pooing any of this. I just think it's interesting that a person like Kip wasn't satisfied with what we all think of as like the dream scenario.
No, I mean, honestly, that piece of the film, Kip's story, resonated a ton with me.
Sure.
My success is not anywhere on the level of Kip's, but to the average person, you would look at my life and go, God, if I could just be there, right? And I've built and sold multiple businesses. We've got the nice house, we've got all that kind of stuff, and I don't take any of it for granted. But as I've gotten older, that it's less and less important. Right. And especially like when we were just talking about, okay, what am I going to do next? I've gone from, when I was younger, being in a neighborhood to then kind of moving outside of a neighborhood to now, like, I moved out to the country away from everybody on a lake. And then all of a sudden they decided to build houses all around me. And now I'm ready to sell this one.
Yeah.
But that's a huge part of what has drawn me to hunting as a 55-year-old guy that literally knows nothing about it. Is it's not necessarily the bow, right? It's the journey and the connection to something that, because I've been in business my whole life and I've never been connected to those things. And there's something that's very freeing, very, I've got I'm very strong in my faith. So I connect a lot of that stuff to God and those kinds of things, but I feel very in tune with, like when I'm out. And I've never been an outside guy. My wife will tell you, like, what in the hell has happened to this guy in the last 6 months? He's like a lunatic because he used to not want to go outside and sweat very much other than when he was at football practice. But I mean, it's completely changed. And so when I saw Kip's story, I was like, damn, like that's me, right? That's right. Where I'm at right now. And I'm trying to learn all that stuff. And, I'd be just as happy to sell the house, sell everything I got. My last daughter's about to go to college and move into some, place in the middle of Montana, but my wife would, leave me and, never talk to me again.
Sure. Yeah.
But that's what I would love to do.
Right.
So it's an interesting story. Do you see that a lot?
Right. So, and this is, I'm trying to think about this as you're saying it, because I've never really thought about it, but prior to making the film, I had felt that, there was a disconnect between what we think is the, quote unquote answer and what the real answer might actually be, from a perspective, a pursuit of happiness kind of perspective.
Less of everything that everyone thinks that they're trying to get.
Right. Yeah. Less of the rat race. So, and I had seen that because I've been lucky enough to be around people like that. And I've not seen any linear association between, financial or business success at a super high level and happiness. I've not noticed that. The happiest people I've seen have been the opposite, actually. So
I think not to cut you off, but I was, the other thing that even though, it was referenced in the story a lot, right? The thing with Roy, but one of the biggest things with Roy that resonated with me was when they went into his room, like there was just this intense feeling of somebody who was completely at peace with who he was, that he had this family that he loved. I loved, I didn't write the verse down. I've got it somewhere. I took a screenshot of it, but one of my favorite parts of that was when you took a shot of this picture of a mountain, and he had, I think it was a verse from, I think it was from Corinthians, but he talked about, being on the mountain, and like that part right there. I was like, this is a guy who knows who he is, isn't trying to chase a bunch of superficial bullshit. And like, he's solid in every piece of his life. And I felt like, as you were telling the story, like that's part of what Kip's searching for. And that's also what Cam really like locked into with Roy, and the reason that Cam like looked up to Roy so much, because Roy was like very well-rounded, very solid, very strong, knew who he was. And as a younger guy, Cam was not like that. And so he really locked onto that sense of security and that sense of being.
Well, I'm always looking for something where I feel like it is going to resonate on a higher level. Like to me, it's vindicating knowing that like what you're telling me, your experience watching that film is kind of like what the intention was making it, and the point I'm trying to get across. Like you're trying to a film or a book or anything. I mean, it's just a way to sort of reach across, through pixels or through pages to people observing, and like share your thoughts and share your experiences, and and also your opinions in a way. And if that resonates with people, and obviously it was the story kind of worked itself out over time. I've spent enough hours looking at it. These kind of pieces all come into place, and you're kind of left with like, you're left with something that is reflective of what Cam believes, what Kip believes, what I believe. And the idea, the hope is that what other people will also believe will resonate with them too. And it becomes like I don't know, it's far greater than like its impact is far greater than just the sum of all the people involved.
From a feedback perspective, obviously you're getting a lot of feedback on how well it was done, how good it was, but is this what's resonating with most people when when people message you, or when you hear from people that either, whether you don't know them or whether people that you do know, what are the comments that you're getting in terms of what's like really kind of resonating with people?
Yeah. I don't know about specific comments, although, I mean, obviously there's been a ton of positive ones. I feel like it's partly kind of what you were saying. So the idea that, and Kip's story reflects this perfectly, is that there is not, the rat race probably isn't the answer for us, even though we're kind of conditioned to think it is. That's one. The other one is, I think, and this is actually part of what I feel too, is I think that, probably especially men, but, I don't want to speak for, or I want to be inclusive to everybody here, but I don't do a lot of just like calling up my buddies and saying, hey, let's go on some cool adventure somewhere that maybe is a little bit dangerous. But let's actually go. And I'm not talking about like some camping trip where you're in a park somewhere and everything. You've got the showers you go to and
TV's plugged in the camper and all that.
Yeah. Whatever. Yeah. Everything's cultivated. Yeah. Again, I'm not, not judging, nothing wrong with that. And I'm sure as heck I'm going to do that with my kids. And, so it's not like I don't do that stuff, but I've got a friend back home that I used to go adventuring out with their little pellet guns when we were kids. Right? His name's Jordan. He's an electrician now. And I often think about our little adventures we had, which felt like huge adventures, right? We got our little pellet guns and we're walking in the fields, and the forest felt like we're 100 miles away from home. We're probably, 1,000 yards. But I think about that now. I think like, I miss doing that stuff. Why aren't I adventuring around the planet and with my buddies that I know have my back no matter what happens? And we're going to, face down storms coming in, and we're going to link arms and we're going to face it down. The grizzly bears coming in or whatever. And we're not worried about it because we're self-sufficient. I honestly feel like to me, when I watch that film, and I'm not trying to, build up my own work or whatever, but I get that out of it. I think like I was so lucky to share the mountains with these people that are total badasses. Like I was by far the least badass person in that group. but I felt like one of them. And I felt like if anything were to happen then and now that we spent that time together, those guys, Cam, Kip, Kobe, Kip's brother, he was there. Johnny, the guy who's probably the biggest badass out of everybody. Those guys had mine back then, and they have it now in a special way that you just don't. I think in the older days, we I don't know, the romantic idea of this is we go to war and we would bond but also we go hunting. They go on hunting trips where it was kind of life or death for whatever it was, the tribes or the communities. It was important, and I just feel like and again, Once We're Wolves, the title. Once we were kind of like that, and I think me speaking personally, I'm lacking that in my life.
Yeah, I like to refer to it as a tribe. It's one of the reasons that even when I stopped coaching football as a profession, that I kept doing it, because as an athlete, to me, one of the hardest parts about transitioning out of athletics is leaving this situation where you're in a locker room with the same guys over and over, and you are grinding, and you are, to the point where you're throwing up all over the place. You are working together to achieve something that very few people are willing to put in the effort, the pain, all the things that it takes to get there. And in doing that work and in going through that journey, you are creating this sense of this bond, this sense of tribe with these other men, when you're in high school, other boys, whatever. And then all of a sudden you're not good enough to compete at that level anymore. And now you're, 2-3 years later, you date, whatever, you get married, and she could be the most wonderful person in the world, but is a huge part of, in my opinion, a man's heart that is instilled in us, that we just give up if we don't make, a really conscious effort to achieve that somehow in our lives. And I felt like you told that story really well, because for Cam, it was Roy. For Kip, it's Cam. Right. And he's finding that in Cam. And if we don't make a conscious effort to somehow create that in our lives, there's a part of us that just goes completely unfulfilled. And I think that's where you get people trying to fill that with money, women, drugs, booze, and it's just an empty hole. It comes in the top, pours out the bottom, because they're not filling the hole with what they really miss, but they don't even know that they miss that.
Yeah, you said that much better than me. Exactly.
So it's interesting, but I mean, I could talk about it forever, but the way you did it, I thought the way you told the story was amazing. I'm hoping to see more of that stuff come down the pipe. So what's next for you? What project are you working on right now? I know that you mentioned the what's American Made, right? Do you have any other independent project like this that you might be working on for YouTube, or what's the next big passion for you?
Well, we're definitely going to do Once We're Wolves 2. I don't.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. That's a I haven't heard that before.
I wish I could, and it's not. I actually don't know. I just know that I've spoken with Kip a bit, and he's kind of been like, "Listen, I'm working on it."
Okay. Well, if you need anyone to help, document or contribute to the tribe, feel free to let me know. I'm fully available.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, and that might happen too, because and this part of that film was the real life was, I don't particularly like being in, like, I would say, quote unquote, dangerous environments. Like, there's kind of a threshold I have, and some of that stuff was a little high for me. So we'll see what they want to do.
So I don't want to sidebar this, but I'm just, because I'm going to forget to ask this. I've thought about it twice and it didn't. No, I wanted to ask you about the time in the brush where, you shot Kip's face, you shot your face. I was wondering, what was the actual lag time between his shot hitting the bear and you actually finding the bear? Like, how long were you in the brush? Because it didn't look like very long, but I'm assuming it was probably longer. And then B, which one of you wanted to jump out of there faster, you or Kip? Neither one of you wanted to be there.
Yeah, I certainly. I mean, because I'm observing, right? And even though I'm recognizing that these stories are unfolding, and I do believe that that there's some I don't know, greater truth going on, and that really we should be out there linking arms and facing the storm.
It's still real life, man. It's still real life, and you're still out there with a freaking huge bear that could kill you. So I mean, you don't forget that in the middle of it,
right? And you can sort of, like, people who know me would probably laugh, because I'm not some badass guy that's like Cam or even Kip, where I'm gonna purposely put myself in danger just to, because I'm at that stage of my life where, that's what I want to do. I currently right now, that's not where I am. So, uh, I don't remember how much time elapsed. It wasn't that long, it wasn't hours or anything. But when I did, turn the camera on and shoot my face, that's all totally real. I was not,
Oh,
I
I
would say I
figured
was
it was.
quite
Yeah,
pissed
I figured
actually
it was. How
during
high
that.
was that grass? Because you couldn't get your arms around the height
Oh,
of
you
it.
couldn't, yeah, you couldn't see hardly anything. It's probably even thicker than what it looks like on film. Like
Oh
film is a
wow.
funny way of showing a
Yeah,
little.
it looked thinner, but I was like, based upon the way everyone was talking, I could tell it was thicker than it looked.
No, you couldn't see anything. Yeah, and that's my fear. Quite honestly, was the bear would come up from the sides or the back or
Sure,
something. So I was,
made
I
sense.
was looking around for the most part and just kind of holding the camera in front of me.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah,
So once We Were Wolves 2 is kind of the next thing that y'all are working on, and
yeah.
then you've got American Made. And so what, if you could say, hey, just kind of wrap things up 5-10 years from now, do you want to still be doing completely outdoor stuff? Is there any other kind of stories that you want to tell? If you had the ability to tell a different kind of story, one time, what would it be?
So I watched. I'll answer the second part first. I remember watching Interstellar. You familiar with that movie?
Yeah, that was a great movie.
Okay, I think it's a great movie. I remember watching that. It's got kind of a weird ending, but I thought it was great.
Yeah, that's the only part of it that's kind of like, what happened there?
Yeah,
But it was
yeah,
filmed, the way they filmed it was amazing.
sure.
The
Yeah.
story.
And that was Christopher Nolan directed that. And I remember walking out of the theater when I saw it and being like, okay, so that's what I want to do someday. Now, is that realistic? Probably not. But if I'm going to answer honestly, I would love to have my film on a theater somewhere, and could be something like Once We're Wolves, or it could be something more like Interstellar, where you're in space. I don't know. I mean, I like all that stuff. I like storytelling and stuff that moves people, and certainly in that day, Christopher Nolan, like we talked about, reaching across the screen and moving somebody, he moved me, and I was yeah, kind of, there's all kinds of points in your life where you change the course of your sort of life or career, and that was one day for me. uh Second part of the question is what else would I want to be doing? um I want to set up, I want to live a fulfilled life, ultimately. And for me, I'm realizing a big part of that, outside of family, is finding people like myself when I was younger, in my whatever teens, 20s, when I was kind of looking for purpose and meaning. And I got lucky enough that I had some successes early on, which kind of helped sort of guide my way forward. Had a lot of open doors. I hit my head a few times and made some mistakes. I would love, but ultimately I found that I almost made a huge mistake. I almost went into finance, and that I don't think that would have fulfilled me like a creative career has. So I'd like to help enable people like myself, younger people, to find creativity and find purpose in life, and make a difference through storytelling, if I can.
That's I love that. That's the older I've gotten, the more I've been interested in putting back into people and helping other people achieve the things they want to achieve. But I think you've really tapped into a lot with the story that you told, in terms of, like you mentioned, that things were missing. And I think just being aware of that at your age is going to make things, not just so much better for you from a personal standpoint, but in terms of the stories you tell. Um, and also how you give back to your family. Like I truly believe that we can't be the best version of ourselves for our family and the people we love unless we're the best version of ourselves for ourselves first.
Yeah, I love that. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey man, it was a pleasure to talk to you, a privilege. I really appreciate you taking the time, and I can't wait to see what you do next. Thanks, brother.
Likewise, Eric. Likewise, Eric. Really means a lot. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks, Branlin.
You're still here?
Thanks for listening to the Do Not Go Quietly podcast
It's over.
with Eric Wilson.
Go home. Go. You're still here?
Thanks for listening to the Do Not Go Quietly podcast
It's over.
with Eric Wilson.
Go home. Go.